The first explosion shook the entire diplomatic compound, shattering windows and triggering every alarm simultaneously. Security Chief Marcus Webb was halfway through his evening rounds when the building's defense systems screamed their warnings into his comm. "This is Webb. Report!" Static, then screaming. Then Sergeant Colvax's voice, the Thracian's four-toned panic unmistakable. "They're inside, raiders, Krill marauders. They blew the eastern perimeter." "We can't, there's too many." A second explosion, closer this time. Marcus was already running toward the central tower, toward the one place that mattered more than any other in this facility. The Queen's chambers. Ambassador Queen Lysimir of the Veltari Empire was here on a historic diplomatic mission. The first time Veltari royalty had set foot on human-controlled territory. The security detail was supposed to be the best of both worlds. Human tactical expertise combined with alien combat specialists from a dozen allied species. Supposed to be. Marcus hit the stairs to the tower at a dead run, taking them 3 at a time. His comm was chaos, reports of raiders pouring in through breached walls, guards falling back, evacuation protocols initiated. Through the noise, he caught fragments that made his blood run cold. Heading for the tower, specifically targeting the Queen, falling back to secondary positions, Marcus burst through the door to the tower's 5th-floor security checkpoint. It was abandoned. The guards who should have been here, 3 Krill warriors and 2 human soldiers, were gone. Coffee still steamed in abandoned cups. Weapons lay on the desk, not taken but left behind. They'd run. "Webb to all units, tower security has abandoned their posts. I'm heading to the Queen's floor. I need backup now." The response was crackling static and distant weapons fire. No one was coming. The Queen's chambers were on the 8th floor, and Marcus could hear the sounds of combat getting closer as he climbed. Energy weapons discharged with their characteristic whine. Something heavy crashed through a wall, shouting in languages he didn't understand. He reached the 7th floor and nearly ran into a squad of his own security team, 4 humans, 2 Thracians, and a Vorkai combat specialist, retreating down the stairs. "Webb," Lieutenant Torres grabbed his arm. "Thank God, we need to evacuate. There's at least 30 raiders, all heavily armed. We're outnumbered and outgunned. The evacuation shuttles are—" "What about the Queen?" Marcus demanded. Torres wouldn't meet his eyes. We can't reach her. The raiders have cut off access to the 8th floor. It's suicide to try. Command says we fall back, regroup, wait for reinforcements. Reinforcements that are 20 minutes out while raiders are literally 1 floor away from killing the most important diplomatic figure in this sector. Marcus jerked his arm free. "No, someone has to hold them until help arrives." "It's suicide," the Vorkai hissed, his toxin glands flaring. "We're trained warriors, and even we cannot hold against those numbers. You're 1 human with a sidearm." Marcus looked at each of them, trained soldiers, combat specialists, beings who'd sworn to protect this compound and everyone in it. He saw fear in their eyes, reasonable, justified fear, but fear nonetheless. "Then I guess I'm going to die today," Marcus said quietly. "But I'm going to die doing my job. Now get out of my way." He pushed past them and continued up the stairs. Behind him, he heard Torres call his name, but no one followed. The 8th floor was a war zone. Scorch marks scarred the elegant walls. Bodies, human and alien both, lay where they'd fallen. The ornate doors leading to the Queen's chambers were sealed, their emergency locks engaged, but Marcus could see plasma burns where someone had been trying to cut through. And standing between him and those doors were the raiders. There were 12 of them in the immediate corridor, Krill marauders in mismatched armor, armed with military-grade weapons that should never have made it onto a diplomatic station. They were focused on the doors, on getting to the Queen, but one of them noticed Marcus. The Krill's mandibles spread in what might have been laughter. He said something in his clicking language that Marcus didn't understand, but the tone was clear. "Look at this fool." Marcus drew his sidearm, a standard-issue plasma pistol that felt pathetically inadequate, and positioned himself between the raiders and the Queen's door. "That's far enough," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. "Turn around and leave. This is your only warning." Now they were all looking at him. 12 heavily armed Krill warriors against one human with a pistol. The lead raider said something that made the others click with amusement. Then they opened fire. Marcus dove behind a decorative column as plasma bolts turned the air where he'd been standing into superheated hell. The column, solid Veltari marble, installed because it looked impressive, absorbed the first volley, but it wouldn't last long. He blind fired around the corner, not expecting to hit anything, just trying to make them think twice about advancing. One bolt got lucky, catching a raider in the shoulder. The Krill went down with a screech. 11 left. Marcus's tactical training kicked in, the years of experience sorting through options at lightning speed. He couldn't win this fight, not in any conventional sense. But he didn't need to win, he just needed to delay them, 20 minutes until reinforcements. He just had to hold for 20 minutes. He triggered the corridor's fire suppression system and foam began pouring from ceiling vents. It wouldn't stop the raiders, but it would obscure their vision, make targeting harder. He used the cover to move, putting another column between himself and the advancing Krill. A raider came around the column, weapon raised. Marcus was faster, barely, and put 2 shots into the Krill's unarmored neck. The warrior fell. 10 left. But they were adapting, spreading out, using proper tactical formations. Marcus recognized the pattern. They were hurting him, boxing him in. In another minute, they'd have him in a crossfire with no cover. Time to change the game. Marcus ran not away from them, but toward them, using their own surprise against them. He slid under the wild shots of the nearest raider and came up inside the Krill's reach, where the larger being's weapon was useless. A human would have dropped the gun and gone for a knife. The Krill tried to use his claws. Marcus was already moving, using the raider's own mass against him, redirecting the claw strike into the warrior behind him. Both Krill went down in a tangle of limbs and cursing. 8 left. A claw raked across Marcus's back, tearing through his uniform and into flesh. He felt the hot bloom of pain but couldn't afford to acknowledge it. He spun, fired twice, and another raider fell. 7 left, but they had him now. Weapons trained from 3 directions, no cover close enough to reach. Marcus's mind ran through scenarios and came up empty. This was it. This was where it ended. Behind him, he heard the emergency locks on the Queen's door disengage. "No," he shouted, not taking his eyes off the raiders. "Your Majesty, stay inside, lock the—" "I will not cower behind doors while someone dies defending me." Queen Lysimir's voice was like music, but there was steel in it, too. "Especially not when that someone is the only guard brave enough to stay." Marcus risked a glance back. The Queen stood in her doorway, resplendent even in the chaos, her orange skin marked with the platinum bioluminescence of Veltari royalty. Her blonde hair was unbound, flowing over shoulders draped in formal robes that marked her as not just a queen but an ambassador. She was beautiful and regal and utterly, maddeningly vulnerable. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice strained, "with all due respect, get back inside and lock the damn door." "No." She moved to stand beside him, and Marcus saw that she held something, a ceremonial energy blade, the kind Veltari royalty carried for formal occasions. It wasn't meant for actual combat, but it hummed with power nonetheless. "I am Lysimir, seventh of her name, Queen Ambassador of the Veltari Empire. I do not abandon those who stand for me." The lead raider said something in Krill, and Marcus didn't need a translation. The tone was clear, how convenient, both targets in one place. "I can't protect you," Marcus said quietly, his eyes never leaving the raiders. "I'm barely holding them here. If you'd stayed inside, then I would have lived with the shame of letting a brave human die alone," Lysimir interrupted. "That is not who I am." The raiders advanced, weapons raised, 7 against 2. It should have been over in seconds. But Marcus Webb had been trained by the best special operations forces Earth had to offer. And Queen Lysimir, for all her diplomatic duties, was descended from a warrior lineage that had conquered half a star system. They moved together without planning, without discussion, operating on pure combat instinct. Marcus took the left flank, his pistol barking in controlled bursts that made the raiders think twice about their approach. Lysimir took the right, and Marcus discovered that the ceremonial blade was far more effective than its designation suggested. It carved through Krill armor like paper, and the queen wielded it with a grace that spoke of extensive training. A raider fell to Marcus's pistol, another to Lysimir's blade. 5 left, but Marcus was running low on charge packs, and he could see that the queen was tiring. The raiders saw it too. They pressed harder, coordinating their fire, forcing Marcus and Lysimir back against the wall. A plasma bolt caught Marcus in the shoulder, and he went down on one knee, his pistol clattering from numb fingers. Another bolt seared past Lysimir's head, close enough to singe her hair. This was it. No more tricks, no more tactical surprises. Just 5 armed raiders and 2 beings who'd fought their best and come up short. The lead raider stepped forward, mandibles clicking with anticipated victory. He said something in Krill that sounded like a speech, probably savoring the moment. Lysimir straightened, her bioluminescent patterns blazing with defiant gold. "If we die," she said quietly to Marcus, "we die standing." "Your Majesty," Marcus managed through the pain, "it's been an honor." She took his hand, her skin warm and electric against his. "The honor was mine, Marcus Webb. You are the first human I've met who truly understands what it means to stand for something greater than yourself." The lead raider raised his weapon, and then the entire ceiling exploded inward. Figures dropped through the breach, armored, moving with lethal precision, weapons already firing. Marcus saw the distinctive insignia of Veltari Royal Guard, the elite warriors who'd been light years away when the attack started. But they weren't alone. Human special forces, their armor bearing the marks of Earth's finest units, Thracian shock troops. Even a squad of Krill warriors, these ones bearing the honor marks of allied clans rather than marauder colors. The raiders didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, it was over. The corridor filled with allied soldiers, medics rushing forward, commanders barking orders and demanding status reports. Marcus tried to stand and failed, his wounded shoulder refusing to cooperate. Lysimir knelt beside him, her hand still in his, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to worried blues and greens. "Stay still," she commanded gently. "The medics are here." "Your Majesty, you should." Protocol. Marcus's voice was getting weaker, shock and blood loss catching up with him. "Protocol can wait," she said firmly. "You saved my life, Marcus Webb. You stood when everyone else fled. That deserves more than protocol." A medic, human, thankfully, which meant they'd know how to treat him, appeared with a field kit. As they worked on his shoulder, Marcus watched the aftermath unfold around him. More soldiers pouring in, securing the floor, treating the wounded, documenting the dead. A Veltari officer in ornate armor approached and dropped to one knee before the Queen. "Your Majesty, I am Commander Silvar of your Royal Guard. We came as quickly as we could. I apologize for—" "You have nothing to apologize for, Commander," Lisamir said. "You arrived in time, but this human," she gestured to Marcus, "he was the one who truly saved me." When all the guards fled, when the compound's entire security force abandoned their posts, he stayed. One human against 12 raiders, buying time until you could arrive. Silvar looked at Marcus with new eyes, and something like shame crossed his features. One human held what an entire security force could not. "He did more than hold," Lisamir said, her voice carrying authority that made everyone nearby stop and listen. "He fought, he bled. And when I foolishly left my secured chambers to stand beside him, he did not send me back. He accepted my choice and fought alongside me as an equal. That is the mark of a true warrior." The next several hours were a blur of medical treatment, debriefings, and investigations. Marcus learned that the raiders had been a hired attack force, paid by Veltari political rivals who opposed the Queen's diplomatic mission. They'd been counting on the security force to fold under pressure, which most of it had. What they hadn't counted on was one stubborn human who didn't know when to retreat. 3 days later, Marcus stood in the rebuilt diplomatic compound's main hall, his shoulder still in a regeneration brace, facing a gathering that included diplomatic representatives from a dozen species and every major news outlet in the sector. Queen Lisamir stood before him in full royal regalia, a vision of alien majesty. But when she looked at him, her eyes were warm. "Marcus Webb," she said formally, her voice carrying through the hall, "you demonstrated courage beyond measure when all others fled. You stood alone against impossible odds, not for glory or reward, but because it was right. Because you understood that some things are worth dying for." She held up a medal, Veltari craftsmanship, beautiful and intricate, pulsing with its own soft light. "I hereby award you the Star of Valor, the highest honor the Veltari Empire can bestow upon a non-citizen. More than that, I name you Guardian Companion to the Throne, a title that has been given only 3 times in our empire's history. You are now, and forever will be, under the personal protection of the Veltari crown." She stepped forward and fastened the medal around his neck. Then, in a gesture that made the crowd murmur with surprise, she pressed her forehead to his, a Veltari gesture of deepest respect and trust. "Thank you," she whispered, too quiet for the crowd to hear, "for reminding me what true courage looks like, for standing when others ran, for being exactly what a guardian should be." Marcus swallowed hard, emotion threatening to overwhelm his professional composure. "Your Majesty, I was just doing my job." She pulled back, a slight smile on her lips. No, Marcus Webb, you did what 12 guards could not, what an entire security force abandoned. You stood alone because it was right. Her smile widened. Though I must note you didn't stay alone for long, I'm told my decision to join you was tactically unsound. Completely insane, Your Majesty, Marcus agreed. But appreciated, you fight well for a diplomat. And you stand well for someone who was supposed to retreat. She turned to address the crowd. Let this be known across all worlds. Humanity has shown us the meaning of loyalty and courage. When we needed a guardian, when all seemed lost, one human stood. And that made all the difference. The applause was thunderous. Later, after the ceremony, after the speeches and the interviews and the official reports, Marcus found himself alone on a balcony overlooking the compound. The damage had been repaired, new guards had been posted, ones who he'd been assured had been thoroughly vetted for courage as well as competence. Lysimir joined him, having shed the formal robes for simpler attire. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, using the human idiom she'd learned. "Just thinking about the guards who ran," Marcus admitted. "They were good soldiers, trained, experienced, but when it mattered, they were afraid," Lysimir said simply. "Fear is not a weakness, Marcus." Every being in that compound felt fear that night. The difference is what you do with it. She looked out over the compound. They let fear drive them away. You let fear drive you forward. That's what makes a hero. I'm not a hero, Your Majesty. I was just the idiot too stubborn to know when to give up. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Then the galaxy needs more idiots like you. She grew more serious. The title I gave you isn't ceremonial, Marcus. Guardian Companion means you have a permanent place in my service if you want it. I could use someone who understands that some things are worth standing for, even when you stand alone. Marcus looked at her, this alien queen who'd risked everything to stand beside him, who'd fought with grace and courage, who now offered him a place at her side. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "I'd be honored, but on one condition." "Oh," her bioluminescent patterns flickered with curiosity. "Next time we're facing impossible odds, you stay behind the locked door like a sensible royal should." She smiled, brilliant and mischievous. "No promises, Guardian Webb. After all, someone has to make sure you don't have all the fun." As they stood together, looking out over the compound that had nearly fallen, Marcus reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He'd been a security chief doing his job. Now he was guardian companion to an alien queen, holder of one of the highest honors in the Veltari Empire, and perhaps most importantly, alive. All because he'd done what seemed obvious at the time, stood his ground when others ran. Sometimes, Marcus thought, the simplest choice was also the hardest, and the most important. Behind them, the compound hummed with renewed activity, life continuing in the wake of chaos. And Marcus Webb, the human who'd stood alone, now stood with a queen who'd chosen to stand beside him. It was, he decided, a pretty good outcome for what should have been his last stand.